in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
With just 2 weeks to go to the parliamentary elections, will voter apathy play an important part in the results? And will the new small parties and independent candidates have an impact?
You have a lot of dissatisfaction with the political elite, and one symptom is some members of the society running as independents or at small groups with limited chances of success.
We talk to the chief returning officer, who assures us that even if you have a fever, you cannot be turned away from the polling stations.
You cannot restrict the right to vote in the centre. If someone comes with let's say, fever, you cannot tell her to go home. They will have to vote.
And we recently celebrated International Midwives Day. It seems that perhaps in Cyprus midwives are both underused and undervalued. They can play a very important role in the health of both mother and baby.
We have increased the rate of breastfeeding. We have decreased complications, decreased maternal mortality and morbidity, or newborn mortality and morbidity. All these are very, very important.
We are literally a couple of weeks away from elections here in Cyprus, and there seems to be a remarkable amount of apathy. Now, is that due to the fact that because of the lockdown, big political rallies have not been held, or is it more to do with people just being very tired of the same old, same old? We're joined on this week's programme by Professor of History and Political Science at the University of Nicosia, and he's also the Director of the Office of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. He is Hubert Faustmann. Hubert, thanks for joining us. What do you make of this few weeks to go, and really everything's terribly quiet, isn't it?
It is. It's an odd parliamentary election in the sense of what you said in your introduction. There's apathy, there's disillusionment with the political elite, the COVID pandemic plays its role, and even the usual ingredients that make parliamentary elections interesting in Cyprus, meaning basically a first litmus test for possible coalitions for the presidential elections, are not happening. So it's the oddest and probably the most boring parliamentary election I've seen in Cyprus, with the exception, and that makes it interesting while being boring, of the apathy and disillusionment of the mass of the population with their political elite.
What I've noticed is the huge number of independents or very small political, you can't even call them political parties, they're just groups of people who've got together and are standing for parliament. We've never had that before, have we?
I mean, we always had a number of individuals running, and the oddity is that the Cyprus party system has been oddly stable in the way the separate party system works. The big parties are still dominant. They've been around for decades. We've seen in other countries of Europe radical restructurings of the political landscape and the disappearance of parties, which we did not see or see only to a very limited degree in Cyprus. But you have a lot of dissatisfaction with the political elite, and one symptom is some members of the society running as independents or at small groups with limited chances of success. My prediction is that the electoral outcome will only see minor shifts in terms of the distribution of parliamentary seats. But one really interesting question is, if some of the small parties make it into the parliament, then it will be very different. Or if they just do not manage to get in, which would then preserve very much the status quo.
Yes, so in a sense it's counterproductive, is it not? Because the big parties have certainly over the last couple of years come under a lot of scrutiny with all the corruption, the golden passports, so many things with the stuff hitting the fan here. And people are disillusioned with the big parties, but all these smaller coalitions of people are surely just going to offer them the chance to get their seats back.
Yep, though the Cypriot response to being fed up with their political elites is less to vote for a different party, but rather than not to vote at all. What we have in the last more than 10 years is a steady decline in voter participation, in abstention from the election. And that I expect for this election as well. So some will vote for other parties, but many will not vote at all. So the biggest protest vote is the non-vote, not the vote for smaller parties. But this is part of the symptom. Elam is part of the symptoms, the party of the extreme right that is expected to gain votes. It's the only genuinely new party that condenses some of the protest votes in their ranks. Everybody else running are established parties. The Green Party might be interesting because they have a new leadership. I expect them also to gain. To me, they're an interesting party to watch. But the other established parties are, as I said, the same parties or split from established parties and are follower parties of some leading personalities that separated from parties. That's a typical phenomenon we have in Cyprus, but they usually don't stand for a different politics or something new. It's just a different variant of established policy making.
Well, it's interesting that you think a lot of people will abstain and simply go to the beach instead of to the polling station, probably. But the fact is, I'm sure I read somewhere recently that there are some 68,000 plus new voters. So surely if they've bothered to become new voters and register, because it isn't an automatic thing here, then they've done so because they intend to go to the polling stations.
They could. I mean, what has been lacking in Cyprus is either people inspiring people or a mobilizing movement where these new voters could find new focal points to put their political loyalty to. But we should also not forget that Cyprus is a staunchly clientelistic society where parties have strong influences over the personal lives of people, and there's still a strong structural pressure in Cyprus to attach yourself to politicians or a party in order to obtain favors, jobs, and other things you need from the state. So the system is also preserving itself through these clientelistic structures, which makes it hard for new parties to emerge.
But it also is one of the reasons so many people are, I think you could say, angry with the way the whole system works.
There's something contradictory in Cyprus. People are fed up with this system. They're angry about the system. But at the same time, if they need a job for their children in the civil service, or favors, building permits, or whatever you need, you still have to go the traditional way of personal connections to get it your way. Yeah? So there's also a bit of a self-contradiction of many Cypriots being personally fed up with the system, but understanding very well that without using their meso, without using the connection, things get not done, or their children will lose out to other children whose parents are willing to play the game. This is one of these self-preserving structures that make change so hard.
And what do you make of the fact that we've had in the last 2 or 3 months several huge conglomerations of citizens on the streets for various reasons, in a sense, again, frustrated, angry and protesting about things the government is doing, or hasn't done even?
This is rare. I mean, the only time I remember where I had a similar level of public agitation is at the Christophilus period, when they had the Mari explosion and people got really, really on their feet because they were fed up with the tragedy for whom they held politicians responsible. This is new. Civil society in Cyprus in this respect has been rather weak, and that we have 2 demonstrations with about 10,000 participants is new. It's a new sign of this frustration. I mean, the corruption scandals, the disillusionment with the political elite is there. But if we look at the polls, it doesn't translate into something radically new. Yeah? And I don't think there's the party or the people that personify this change and are credible for a large number of people and rally them behind themselves. Where's the political voice for change people believe in? If this would occur, there's definitely the potential for a lot of electoral support from those circles of frustrated people.
And finally, Hubert, tell me what you think about the fact that the lockdown has now been lifted, and that actually gives the parties and all the candidates, I guess, but particularly the bigger parties because they're better organised, the chance to hold some of their election rallies and try and get their public back behind them.
It's traditional activities, but they basically can mobilize their supporters in public shows of support. More interesting is that the game for favors behind the scenes when people demand from politicians favors in exchange for their votes, which happens quite frequently. in Cyprus. But of course, they will go from door to door, try to mobilize people. And one feature of Cyprus that makes parties so successful in doing so is that people are very open about their political affiliation, and political parties can find out, or very often can find out, for whom somebody voted, which also gives them power in terms somebody doesn't vote for the party and they find out. So this kind of small, closed society politics that characterize Cyprus, of course, gives parties, when they can become more active and basically check on their members, try to mobilize their members, a bit more leverage. But I don't think the party rallies will really convince the mass of the people to vote differently than for whom they would vote anyway.
So we could sum up our chat with plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose?
If you translate that for me into English.
Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, as I said, we will see probably increased votes for Elam. We'll see probably increased votes for the Greens. We will see losses for DC. Akel not really gaining much or having slight losses, but how big the losses are for DC is maybe one of the interesting questions here. So we'll see signs of change, but in particular if the small parties don't manage to get in terms of seats distribution, we might end up with a very similar parliament than the one we have now, and we will not see a radical transformation of the party political landscape in terms of new voices or that signifies substantial change to the established practices. So the frustration of the voters is likely to continue, and the potential for something different is there, but in the absence of somebody embodying this and convincing people that himself or herself and the party they represent stand for change, things stay very much the same, with an unhappy populace, which has always some potential for surprises.
That is Hubert Faustmann, Professor of History and Political Science at the University of Nicosia and also Director of the Office of the Friedrich Abad Foundation. Well, we're going to continue on the topic of the elections because joining us on this week's programme is our Chief Returning Officer. He is Menelaos Vassiliou. And Menelaos, I guess that this particular election is going to be rather unlike any that we've had before, isn't it? I mean, has it made your life very difficult trying to organise things in and around the pandemic?
Yeah, that's right. The pandemic caused a lot of problems in all aspects of the elections. We will have for the first time movable election centres that will visit the houses and maybe hospitals. People will be hospitalized in order to vote. These are things that we're doing for the first time. It's quite a challenge for us.
And of course it's going to make it very much more expensive. Have you got any idea how many people the mobile units may have to visit? Because I presume that can change even the day before if somebody has to go into self-isolation.
We don't have the numbers yet because the procedure will start on the 17th of May. They will have the right to apply people who are COVID positive, and they will be in isolation on the day of the election. So at the current moment, these people are not, we don't have people of that category yet. The actual number will depend on the applications we will have from the 17th of May until the 28th of May. That is the expiration of the period which someone can apply.
Right, and the point is they have to apply. You have no way of, I suppose, accessing the data on these people to know whether they're self-isolating. So if I'm stuck at home because I've tested positive, what do I have to do if I want to cast my vote?
You can apply. There will be a platform on our website. Someone could apply in order to vote in these centres.
And what about the actual polling stations that are usually set up in schools? I presume that social distancing, negative tests, what's the rule on that?
The negative test will be, they would have to be made by the people working there and not by the people who will visit these centres to vote, because you cannot restrict the right to vote in the centres. If someone comes with let's say fever, you cannot tell her to go home. They will have to vote. So the whole procedure will be held under a strict protocol from the Ministry of Health. Everyone should have a face mask. They will sanitize their hands. They will use sanitized depends.
But nobody will be turned away from the voting booths if they don't have a negative test or they're feeling feverish or whatever. You'll let them vote.
Yeah, everyone will vote. There is no restriction on that.
And what about the counting of the votes? Because once again, that's usually done in closed areas and you like to get the results out, I know, early evening if possible. That presumably is going to be delayed this year.
We're trying not to have the regular times as usual and not to be delayed. The votings will be counted on the election centres as normal under the protocol of the Ministry of Health.
So what else would you say has been different this year from an organisational point of view?
Everything is different because of the pandemic. All the procedures are different. The pandemic influenced all the election procedures, not just the voting procedure or the movable voting stations. It influenced the preparation of the elections because we have to work in distance. There are people who cannot work as usual, the people who will print
the voting slips.
They will have to prepare the electoral stations. So the pandemic influenced all the aspects of the procedure, not just the voting procedure on the voting day.
So you do seem to have everything taken into consideration. Is there anything that has not been thought of, unforeseen circumstances that could have an impact?
I think we have everything set down. From now on it will be just a matter of numbers. But the procedures we have to follow have already been established.
And of course we should say that anybody who hadn't already registered to vote, it's too late I think to do that now, but your advice to people who are going out to vote is presumably to leave plenty of time to queue up at distance and so on and so forth.
Yeah, they will have to keep the distance on the election centres. In the election centre there have to be only 2 or 3 people at the current moment. So if a lot of people come to the station, they have to be patient about the procedure.
Well, it's obviously been a very difficult organisational year for everybody at the electoral services. Chief Returning Officer Menelaos Vasiliou, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
May the 5th is International Day of the Midwife, and on that occasion midwives across the globe celebrate their very special profession. Now here in Cyprus we don't, I think, have very many midwives. They're certainly not on the front line of, I think, the majority of ladies who go into labour. So it's a pleasure to welcome to the programme this week Stella Leontiou, who is President of the Midwives Committee at the Nurses and Midwives Association. Stella, can you first of all give us an idea of how many midwives we have in Cyprus? Because they don't, as I said, seem to be up there in the front when it comes to visiting the obstetrics departments of hospitals, for example.
We have about 350 midwives in Cyprus, half of them in the private sector and half of them in the public hospitals. Are not enough, of course, but the shortage of midwives is not just a matter of Cyprus. It's a global condition that we can find. We try to do the best, and according to the theme, as you said before, follow the data, invest in midwives. We look forward to advocate for the investment in the more quality midwifery care, and we try to do our best for this. Instead, we believe that we don't have the full support from all the other professionals, related professionals, and especially the gynecologists that are our main collaborators.
Well, one of the things that my regular listeners are very well aware of, because we've spoken about it so many times, is the huge number of caesarean sections that are carried out in Cyprus. It's over 50%, I believe. And generally speaking, am I right in thinking that if midwives are in charge of labour, that number has been proven to drop dramatically.
Yes, of course. It is the data speak by their own. I mean, the research shows globally that the delivery, it has to be normal. It's a physiological process. In Cyprus, unfortunately, we have about 57%, which is more than the half of births in Cyprus, which is about 9,500 per year. So about 4,500 every year, it has to be cesarean section, and even more. I believe that the problem is that the gynecologist says that the women have the choice, and it's their choice to have cesarean section, but it's not always like this. We cannot say that it's the responsibility of the woman. If we don't give the proper information to them for what the cesarean section is, for the complications later on, and why the delivery is a normal process and we have to face it like this, they cannot decide for the normal way to deliver. The most important for the cesarean section is the unknown that they have to face. And a lot of times this fear makes the woman feel that they cannot bring their babies in the normal way, and it's better for them to choose the cesarean section.
Well, I know that for a long time there was a huge choice here, elective cesarean section. You would go into the clinic, have the baby on a day and at a time that suited both you and your obstetrician. But it's because, is it not, the prenatal care and the information out there is not as widespread as it should be. Do the obstetrics departments of our hospitals and our clinics run prenatal care sessions so that they can teach the breathing, give the information so that women can make an informed decision?
Okay, the prenatal care is given in hospital by the midwife, and then the woman goes to the doctor. But unfortunately, we don't have midwifery in the community. So we can understand by this that the women have the access to the midwife, but not in the public sector. And they have prenatal classes for the information, for the psychoprophylaxis, for the physiological process of birth, but not in such a huge rate in order to prevent the cesarean section. So this is another big problem. And the fact that till now the women, even if according to the regulation, the midwife has the role in the autonomous profession for the low-risk pregnancies, I mean that pathology is not included or any complications during birth. We don't have any complications, so to send the woman to the gynecologist, this is another reason that a woman has not direct access to the midwife, and they saw only the gynecologist.
Let me just get this clear. Suppose I'm about to give birth and I go to my local hospital with our National Health Service or so on. Now, if I've been seeing you as my midwife in my prenatal care, will it be you that greets me as I come into the hospital in labour and sees me through the birth, or will it be the doctor?
It's the choice of the woman, actually. I mean, the woman must have a choice, but nowadays, with the new system, the whole situation is a little bit confused. I mean, because the whole system has been changed. Because with the new national health system, which is under the innovation, all the women are registered and they are beneficiary of the system and they come to the hospital. But we have a lot of inquiries yet, and we don't know what is going on with the birth inside the hospital. We gained last July, after a lot of struggle with all the political parties and the parliament, to pass the direct entry of the woman to a midwife in the community, and this is going to be a huge step for our profession because the woman will come to the midwife. But later on, the big problem, and I don't know how it will work, the midwife has to come in cooperation with the gynecologist, either in the hospital or outside, in case that the woman chooses her to help her with delivery, to make the admission in either in a private clinic or in the hospital, and the midwife will do the delivery. The access in the system that the midwife will make the admission and the discharge. Only a doctor can do this.
So that obviously needs to be cleared up, it would seem to me. Again, I'm comparing with other European countries where you don't even see the consultant obstetrician unless there's a problem, because you've filled out your preferences for the birth, whether or not you're going to be given some form of pain relief or whatever else before you go in. And as you go in, you're greeted by the midwife on duty. She takes you to the delivery room and she stays with you until her shift ends, when another midwife would arrive if you're still in labour. It's fairly straightforward. Why can't we organise something like that here?
Okay, here, what is going on in Nicosia, in other hospital, all the department, I mean the prenatal and the labour and postnatal care is together, and all the midwives are working in all places. But in Nicosia, because it's a reference hospital, for the complicated also pregnancy, the system is different. What I mean, the midwives in the prenatal care are different from the other, that the woman will come in labor, and while all time during labor we see some familiar midwives in prenatal care, and we have information there and counseling for breastfeeding, for psychoprophylaxis. Later on in labor we'll meet another midwife, and the midwives also there have the chance to help her to deliver her baby. But if the doctor, if the gynecologist that is in duty says that he or she prefers to do the delivery, she will do it, because they said that they have the responsibility for the woman at the end of the day.
So it does seem that a little bit of the problem is actually the doctors themselves, in a sense, not being willing to hand over responsibility to the midwives. We have to end it there, I think, Stella. Hopefully that all of this will be sorted out sooner rather than later, because we haven't even covered the fact that not only is it better for the mother, it's also much, much better for the baby if it's a natural birth, and, of course, with a midwife perhaps helping afterwards with establishing breastfeeding.
And not only this, it is cost effective. This is through research and detected that in case that you have normal breast, we have shorter stage in the hospital, we have increased the rate of breastfeeding, we have decreased complications, decreased maternal mortality and morbidity, or newborn mortality and morbidity. All these are very, very important points that have to be straight out and give us the opportunity and the fact to say that midwife is more cost effective.
So it not only saves money, it saves lives, and it is the best possible start in life for every single baby. That's been proven across the globe. Stella Leon-Deal, President of the Midwives Committee at the Nurses and Midwives Association, thanks for telling us all about it. May the 17th to the 21st is European Public Health Week, and the University of Nicosia's medical school is running a series of events that are open to the public to mark the occasion. The moderator is Maria Cecilia Mosquera, Assistant Professor in Lifestyle Medicine at the medical school. She joins us now. Maria Cecilia, can you very quickly just outline for us what is the idea behind this series of lectures and discussions?
European Public Health Week is occurring all throughout Europe, and different organizations and institutions are hosting it. This is the week there is a daily theme to align with the themes of European Public Health Week. The first one on Monday will be about communication during the COVID-19 pandemic in English, and it will be about what we can learn and how to move forward. Then on Tuesday, we will have an event about the mental health of children and parents during the COVID-19 pandemic, and this will be in Greek. We will also have an event on Wednesday, which will be about an introduction to pedology and its benefits for health. And we're going to also have an event on Wednesday in Greek around lifestyle and how we can think about our lifestyle 1 year into the pandemic. And then on Thursday, we have an event that's related to the One Health theme. And then Friday, we're going to have an event about leaving no one behind. So there's thought about our most vulnerable during the pandemic. All events are free to join. When people want to register, all they have to do is go to the University of Nicosia Medical School webpage, and they'll find all the events there. They can register for free. They can join us. We have many partners who are participating in all these different events.
That is Maria Cecilia Moscara, Assistant Professor in Lifestyle Medicine at the University of Nicosia's Medical School, which is running that European Public Health Week series of events from Monday the 17th until Friday the 21st of May. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.